Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps, Books, Beverages, and Author Conversations. Today I'm joined by author Kate Alice Marshall to talk about her newest summer thriller, We Won't All Survive. Hello, Kate. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. As you were just saying, it's been a really busy week. So how's it been?
It's been fun. I have been keeping myself very busy, and we've had some excitement around the neighborhood to distract me from the book release nerves. We have a cougar prowling around, which has been very exciting. My children are constantly on the lookout for it. So it's been very wilderness themed around here, which is appropriate.
Wow, yeah, rightfully so that they're very excited. I too would be looking all over for that. Okay, that's awesome. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you about your newest book. But before we do that, you have a fun pairing for us. So, what have you paired for this episode?
Well, one of the biggest struggles in this book is staying hydrated. So, uh, cheekily, I wanted to suggest just finding the biggest water bottle you can. But failing that, my favorite hot weather treat is a bit of pineapple juice with just seltzer or club soda on top. And if you're one of my adult readers and you want to add a little gin or tequila, I'm not going to stop you.
There we go. It's something for everybody, but very refreshing, whether you're doing it mocktail style or cocktail style. So I love it. And yes, hydration is key for this story and this summer, everything. So why don't you give us a quick overview of We Won't All Survive for what readers can expect from this story?
Sure. We Won't All Survive follows Mercy, who has survived a mall shooting, but has wiped out her younger sister's college fund with her medical bills. And so, in an attempt to earn back that money, she's signed up for a survival themed reality TV series. But when she arrives at the isolated ghost town where this is supposed to be filmed, all of the other competitors are there, but none of the crew is. And they find themselves locked in with the game running, but they're not sure it's supposed to be. And they have no way out and no way to survive except to play along. And then someone turns up dead.
It gives a little bit Saw-like, but I know that that is not the age group. But that was what popped into the head. Maybe that shows like the millennial in me that that's what I definitely think about. But very twisty, turny. Lots of other like underlying important themes too that I hope we can talk about with this story. But what inspired you to write this? Was there a particular moment or an idea that sparked this story?
Well, any book is a lot of little moments and sparks coming together, but the true origin of this one was a very specific moment when I was out on a crowded street with my husband and said entirely too loudly, I just want to trap a bunch of teenagers in an isolated location and start killing them off one by one. I was just in the mood to write an isolation thriller and kind of the one by one style mystery. And so we were on vacation and he's like checking to make sure that I'm not going to get arrested. But then once we got back to the hotel safely, I sat down and just started writing about like what kinds of stories would fulfill that feeling for me. And one of the biggest challenges is just actually isolating people in the United States in particular, where if you walk for a couple miles in most places, you're at least going to hit a road. And it's actually quite difficult to find a plausible place where people could be stuck, but not like lost in the woods, milling about. And so a lot of the practical considerations of like, how do I keep these people stuck there? And what forces can make them not be able to leave created the geography of the place. And then from there, I started to fill in the okay, how do I get them there? And why are they there? And who are they? What draws these particular people to that place? And I had many, many versions of what it could be. And some of them were insanely elaborate. And I had so many different versions of what the premise would be and what would draw them there. And some of them were very complex in a way that I realized like it seemed really fun to write, that some were more Saw like and things like that. And I realized that that wasn't like my strength as a writer to create that kind of puzzle box. And so there was a lot of like trying to find where I am in this space. And that was where the themes started to come out. And I started to really dig into who the characters were. And that is how I ended up with We Won't All Survive.
I love it. I love the premise. I think it's so interesting too that it was almost an intrusive thought that you like let
Yeah.
go that it makes me think of another interview that I read once of an author where she was talking about I think she went on vacation if I'm like pulling an interview that I read years ago, and she goes, I went on vacation with my husband and we showed up there and I said to him, I want to kill somebody here. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And like that was just how it started.
It's a common affliction among writers.
It is, but I love it. What do you think draws you to the thriller genre in general, especially being that you've written thrillers for all ages?
I love thrillers for their ability to really dig into character and psychology. And I love the combination of, pulse pounding excitement and a twisty mystery. But then so much of that mystery is just digging really deep into who someone is and what secrets they're keeping and how they tick. And that, like, just crawling into the brains of characters is the joy that I get in writing the most. And so it's the perfect genre for me where I never get bored because either, somebody's getting bonked on the head or I'm delving into their childhood trauma.
Yes, very true. Which, I mean, on that note, you are balancing not only the suspense and the mystery of the story and all of the challenges that come with survival, um, but also the additional themes. You kind of mentioned it when you were giving us the brief overview of like being a survivor and likely having survivor's guilt and the trauma that's associated with that. Can we talk a little bit about why and how you decided to include these topics and what it's like to really dig into that, like how deep and emotional those are?
Yeah, when I started to write, I thought a lot about what survival means and what it means to different people. And so in We Won't All Survive, the show is created by this guy named Damien Dare, who's a type of guy that will be very familiar. He's like a tech billionaire who's got a podcast and is very like macho and believes in like warrior culture and survival of the fittest. And he wants to create this game in part to kind of prove that there is one version of the type of person who's good at surviving and one version of survival that is correct and effective. And Mercy's version of survival ends up being much more about trust and connection and community, which is very opposite of what he believes. And so that was the dichotomy I was really digging into with like, what do I want to say in this book? Because I don't really want to write a book where the ultimate takeaway is like, you can't trust anyone and you shouldn't trust anyone. And, everyone's out for themselves. And so I thought a lot about who this guy was, what his philosophy was, because that's ultimately going to be something that I'm talking about and around and against. And the idea that all of these characters have been through some form of trauma or a survival situation came from thinking about him and how he would think about negative experiences and violence as like a crucible that you go through, and then the strong survive and the weak fall away. And that's good. It's good that this has happened to you because it's made you stronger. And it's so much more complex and damaging and difficult than that. And I like the idea of him sort of being like the stand in for our culture that's very hungry for these traumatic stories and the drama of the backstory of every reality contestant. And the more intense, the better. But that then that also allowed me to have these characters who each have a very different response to having gone through that, whether it's to deny that it affected them at all, or to make their lives all about it, or to just still be swamped in the middle of it. And that was very fascinating for me from a writing standpoint to try to tackle.
And what about a research standpoint too? I mean, did you have to do either when it comes to like the psychology or forensic type stuff? Is there any research that you did as a part of your process for this story? Because, I mean, to your point, like how people in general respond to trauma looks different. I mean, we say that all the time. People grieve differently, everyone responds to trauma differently. So, did you also not only have to think about it and when you're creating all of the different characters, but did you do any sort of research too to try to figure out how or what that looked like for them?
I drew on a lot of research and reading that I have done pretty much throughout my career. I've touched on similar themes. From I Am Still Alive on, which is another, it's a survival story. It's very much about grief and trauma. And so I have been reading about survival psychology for a long time. And then in this one, I was bringing in a little bit more of the true crime type research that I have done as well. So what I found was that there wasn't as much that I needed to go out and find new inspiration and research for, so much as it was an opportunity to pull in a lot of what I've been focused on and where my work has been dwelling for many years.
That makes a lot of sense. You brought up true crime, and that is definitely a tip to that with this story. But as someone who also I hate saying enjoys true crime because enjoy is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. Is there a true crime story or podcast, show, documentary that you personally like have really found fascinating or that you would recommend to other true crime? Because people that are interested in the thriller genre, I think it's safe to say a lot of them also are are interested in true crime.
Let me think about that for a moment.
Okay,
I've got uh there's a lot of stuff that like I get a lot out of, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I enter a lot of true crime in a spirit of it's a complicated space to be in. And
for
I
sure.
think that there's a lot of stuff that really toes a line between exploitation and education. And so it's hard when you're going into something and you're like, I got a lot out of that, but also it made me uncomfortable. um I actually have kind of an off the wall one. So this is not true crime, but it is the book that I often credit with making me very interested in the psychology of my characters in a new way and looking at the way that their lives shape them. It's called James Tiptree Jr., The Double Life of Alice B. Sheldon. It's written by Julie Phillips. And it's about a woman who is actually a science fiction author who wrote under a male pen name in secret for a long time. And she had a very fascinating life. And the true crime element is that her life ended in a what was either a suicide pact or a murder suicide, and it's
Oh, wow.
unclear which it was. And so that shadow looms over her life, and reading all of the things she went through and who she was and looking at the way it's reflected in her writing, there were so many facets of interpretation and figuring out who she was and how she could have come to that place. And so I often point to that one as like that is what really clicked me into, oh, what I want to write about is who is that person and how did they get there?
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I'm gonna have to look that up. That's a super, super interesting. Um, and I mean, I agree with that. I've talked a lot about when my husband's a physician's assistant. So when he was in PA school and they take like a psychology class, I've just long been like fascinated with why, like how the mind works and how it responds to different things and how we become who we are. And so that sounds very, very interesting, like something I would potentially want to look into. So I'm glad you shared that. More on your process and craft. Are you someone who heavily outlines your story in advance, or do you find and discover different twists along the way?
A bit of both. I find that I have become more of an outliner as my writing career progresses, which I think is less about becoming more of a planner and more about being able to uh, predict my own whims better and having a better instinct for my own instincts. So it used to be that if I outlined something, I'd be making pretty arbitrary choices. And by the time I got there, it was like, well, this feels hollow. I don't know why I was making that decision. It was like, it's a very like procedural, well, something needs to happen next. So what could happen next kind of decision. And now I am much better at sensing the heart of my own story and knowing which kinds of paths I like to wander down. And so I'm much more able to find the core moments of a story before I sit down to write it. But outside of those sort of core moments, and I think of them as milestones. And for me, the things that I follow are like the sort of stomach drop moments. So like a big revelation or a betrayal or just something that's going to be an emotionally heightened moment in the story. So I sort of put those along the track. And the outline that gets in between them, like how are we going to get there, is a lot more loosey goosey. And then I always find that when I get to a certain point, I have to stop and reconsider because I almost always have one character who doesn't need to be there and someone who needs to be there and isn't yet. And I often find that after about a third of the book, I have left a thread of tension out that needs to go in. So I'll go back and add in like a little bit of subplot, a little bit of character backstory that's going to make everything a little bit more tense.
Okay, very interesting. Your explanation of all that reminds me a lot of Ginny Meyer's Sane too, which is interesting because you both kind of write in the thriller space. So on that note then, and maybe without spoiling, hopefully without spoiling, which character or storyline surprised you the most in this book?
I do have one character who is very much supposed to bite it. And then I fell in love with them a little bit too much. So I saved them at the last second.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
and then, one of the things that surprised me the most was just how much I got uh, attached to not just the characters, but who they were to each other. And the way that that shaped the themes that came out. Because I kind of knew like the top line, the big picture themes that I was working towards on the sort of intellectual side. But as I expressed them through these characters who they all have secrets, they all have layers to them, and they all have things that are unexpected about them. And I just started to feel very a little sappy about the whole thing. But I think I stayed fierce and cruel to them as well, though. Don't worry, it's a very exciting book. But I think that having that heart to it surprised me and strengthened it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe surprise you, but I also feel like it's so fitting for this story, very appropriate for it. Now, when When you're in the midst of writing, are you someone who you're also like reading thrillers at the same time? Or do you go in a totally different direction, try to steer clear of anything that's similar to what you're writing? Because I've heard both. I've heard some people say, oh, I like to be immersed in the genre that I'm writing in. And then on the flip side, I mean, I know there's a romance writer, and she's like, no, when I'm writing, I'm hardcore thriller. She's like, I'm not reading anything romance. Where do you fall?
Um, I don't have a system, but I do think that I tend to be drawn to other genres when I'm writing a particular story. I'll read a lot of that genre when I'm in sort of the idea generation stage.
Okay.
I want to, I do a lot of just like reading a book and going like, what did I like about that? And if you boil it down and boil it down and boil it down, what is the tiniest little spark of a feeling that makes me fond of this book? Is it a particular theme? Is it a character relationship? Is it the setting and like the vibe of the setting? Because if what I really loved about this book is that it's set in this beautiful desert setting. Maybe I want to tuck that away for later as something that I want to do. And by reading widely in the genre at that point, I find that it also helps me not be too influenced by any one thing and to be very conscious with my influences. But if I'm reading them when I'm writing it, it can kind of start to muddle the voice. But I'm very much like I'm a bit of a a magpie when it comes to voice in general. So like I need to vary things when I'm writing. So I'm not like suddenly writing a thriller in like a high fantasy voice because that's all I've been reading. And suddenly it's like someone saying thou and I need to just hard stop.
Yeah, can you imagine? Oh, it's funny. Well, and you bring up setting too, and well, for a lot of stories, but especially the genre, like the setting really is a character for this book and for stories in general. So you're right, that's true, where it's like, okay, like you can pick out something and be like, oh, I did really like that setting. Not to like bring her up again, but Jenny Meyer's saying she said the same thing where she's like, "Oh, I like kind of find a setting and then I figure out how do my characters respond in that place." So, I think that's the similarities for the thriller genre are so interesting to me. Well, because this is also a reader podcast, is there any book that sticks out in your mind that you've read for fun that you would recommend?
My go-to recommendation right now is I'll recommend the first one because the second one's not actually out yet. It's called Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. And full disclosure, she's a friend of mine, and I read like many drafts of this book. But I find it endlessly delightful. It's about the daughter of uh, Jonathan Harker from Dracula, and she teams up with the daughter of Dr. Moriarty to hunt monsters through Paris at the turn of the century as part of the monster hunting society of the era. And it's got a bit of horror. It's got a really fabulous mystery structure to it, and it's got a bit of kissing in it too.
Just a little bit there so you can taste. Okay, that sounds so much fun. And were you hinting that there's a second one that you would
Yes, the
recommend?
next one is called Wayward Souls, and
Okay.
it takes them to Ireland. And I'm very much looking forward to reading it because I did read a version of that one too, and it changed drastically. So I feel like I get to read it twice.
Oh, how fun. Very cool. All right. Well, yours is like the perfect end of summer thriller right now, and those sound very great heading into the fall season
Yes,
as well. Like a
absolutely.
little cozy fall read. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but sort of bringing it back to We Won't All Survive. What are some of the emotions or thoughts that you hope readers walk away with?
I hope that first and foremost, it's a fun, thrilling, nail biter. And I hope that they come away with a sense of hope in the face of impossible odds, and a feeling of camaraderie and triumph, as well as, plenty of stomach clenching moments along the way.
Well said, well said. That captures it very, very well. Now, not to put you on the spot with this, especially in the midst of the very busy week that you've had and what also seems just like a very busy year in general, but is there anything you can tell us about what you may be working on next?
So, my next book will be in February, I believe, late February, and that is my next adult thriller, which is called The Girls Before. And it follows two people. One of them is a search and rescue volunteer who is haunted by the disappearance of her childhood best friend. And she finds evidence that is linked to uh, the presumably runaway girl at her school, and also to a local legend of a witch in the woods who's supposed to avenge abused women and sometimes steal them away. And so she becomes convinced that there's something going on out there, and that this girl has been taken and didn't just run away. And so she starts looking into that. And at the same time, the other perspective is a young woman who has been abducted and is trapped in a bunker. But the her abductor has stopped coming. The door isn't opening anymore. She's chained to a wall and she's running out of food and water. And so she needs to find a way to escape. And she is kept company by a sort of chorus of ghosts that she has imagined that are the girls who were there before her and who become the sort of voice of her hope and anxiety and her attempts to escape.
You literally gave me chills. In the best, like in a great way. Okay, I cannot wait to look out for that in February. Wow, your turnaround for books is very, very fast.
I've been very busy.
Well, we're super appreciative then in the midst of all of this that you made some time to come on this show. For other readers or aspiring writers, anyone that's interested that wants to connect with you, where is the best place to do that?
I am mostly a digital hermit, but I post some book news on Instagram at K Marshall Arts. And then on my website, katemarshallbooks.com or katealicemarshall.com, both will work. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is like the most reliable way to actually get news about giveaways and what I'm working on next and all of that kind of thing.
Very fun. I will be sure to do that and also link to all of that in the podcast notes for anyone that wants to connect with you or follow along with everything that you have coming with everything for We Won't All Survive and the future projects as well. Kate, this has been so much fun and so fascinating to get to talk with you and really dive into your craft and the story behind this story. I'm super, super appreciative for your time and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a lot of fun.
Cheers.
Cheers.